Well, like Paul said, I was a chairman of the Nebraska Healthy Soils Task Force, which we completed. The task force work completed the end of 2020, but the real work in Nebraska for soil health is just beginning. This was just a report that we came up with. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of background, some of the findings that we had, and some of the next steps that we're going to be doing. So first of all, the task force was formed when the Nebraska legislature passed LB 243 about a year and a half ago, and it essentially called for this task force to be created. You can see the members of the task force there. I'm not going to go through them all, but academia was represented, agribusiness, as well as environmental, natural resources, and also production agriculture were all represented. So it was a good group. A pretty good cross section of folks that were on this. As a task force, we established for ourselves this mission statement, which is to develop a positive and proactive plan for soil health to ensure an enriched, resilient, and sustainable future for the state of Nebraska. So that's kind of what guided us and directed us through the process. Once we met, somehow or another, I got elected as the chairman of this body of folks. So it was quite an interesting experiment. To try to wrangle all these different people and personalities towards an ultimate goal. So I just want to share some of the things that we had in our report. I will post a link later on here in the chat. If you want to go, you can download a copy of the report to have the full thing if you would like. But, you know, in any discussion on soil health, it's always important to define what you mean by soil health. And so the definition that we put down is very similar. It's very much based on the NRCS definition that is probably the most widely used one out there. But we added to it just a little bit. We said soil health is the capacity of the soil to function as a dynamic living ecosystem that nourishes plants, sustains animals and people, and improves the environment. And we kind of added those last caveats on there to just further flesh out exactly what soil health does. In that it's nourishing plants, sustains people, and improves the environment. And if you can meet all three of those, we really feel like you've got a good, healthy soil. We further went on to say a soil becomes healthier when these three things are happening. Organic matter levels are increasing through carbon sequestration. Water infiltration rates are improving, which reduces erosion, runoff, and flooding. And then the third thing is when the soil's biological life is diverse and abundant. And when those three things are happening, we feel that there's really, the soil is really showing signs of good health. And why is it important? We've got a big portion of our report dedicated to this section. Why it's important? Because this report was to go to the governor and to the Ag Committee of the legislature. And so we weren't really sure, you know, where they were at, you know, in their understanding of soil health. So we spent a considerable amount of time talking about why soil health is important, you know, and you know, I'm preaching to the choir on this webinar about that, but there's just many, many reasons why soil health is important. These are some of the ones that we highlighted in our report, some in more detail than others, but certainly we discussed each one of these. Improved water quality, reduced erosion and sedimentation, healthy soils and healthy people, trying to make the connection there. We talked about lower inputs and better profitability for farmers. So in other words, healthy economics is very important. Improved quality of life can come from having better soil health, wildlife and pollinator benefit, and then of course, resilience against extreme weather. So again, we talked about each one of these in varying detail in the report. And if you'd like to download the whole thing, I say I'll provide that link to you later. I did want to just highlight economics a little bit. We spent a lot of time in putting some economics in here because every single person that we talked to said, hey, what would you like to see in this report? Why is soil health important? What do we need to do to get more soil health adopted in Nebraska? Invariably, it came back to economics. You know, farmers aren't going to do this if you can't show that it's economically viable. 100% agree. You know, we're farmers. We understand that. And so we did spend a decent amount of time talking about economics, some in the general terms, and then we tried to do some just like what I'm showing you here. This is right out of the report. This is a very specific example from a Nebraska farmer who is a meticulous record keeper and had really good records. And we just highlighted, you know, that here's, you know, what Jeff has been able to do. his cost of production on corn is $2.79, on beans 6.52, on wheat 5.04. And so we're showing his cost of production as compared to the lowest cost UNL budget estimate, and he's below that in every case. In some instances below it considerably, like on his dryland corn. And so we use that as an example of how healthy soils can really lead to healthy economics. Had a few quotes there from Jeff that we pulled right out of that report. So we felt that was important to not only give the big picture economic, which we've got some of that data in there, but to have the real specifics. This is a real live Nebraska farmer who is, making his living off the farm. And here's the numbers that he has seen. Here's what he's doing. A big one, that first quote there, he's been able to cut his nitrogen back to 0.59 pounds per bushel of corn. He's gone to all conventional soybeans, so he's saving on seed costs there. He doesn't have insecticide or fungicide treatment costs. So just a lot of those pieces of information we felt were really important in making the economic case. We kind of ended this section with this quote from Ratan Lal, Dr. Ratan Lal from Ohio State. He says, soil health determines the productive capacity of any agricultural practice. By improving soil health, we can produce more from less land, less water, less fertilizer, less pesticides, less environmental damage, less emission of greenhouse gases. And so we felt like that really summed up what we're trying to accomplish is we want to produce more by using less. And we feel that's what soil health can bring to the table. So of course, again, I'm not saying anything new to folks here, but I wanted to make sure I just quickly covered this because it is in the report, because this report can be used as a tool to help educate people that aren't familiar with the concept. I'm going to be doing a presentation similar to this for some urban senators in a couple of weeks here. And so anytime we get this information out in front of non-farmers, non-agricultural workers, it's really good. So we talk about the principles of soil health, and I just real quickly will go through these, again, as a summary of what we had in the report. And a lot of these pictures are from our own farm. I like to share those just to show what we're doing as well. But, the principle number one, just keep the soil covered. Just stress over and over again how important that is from a weed control standpoint, like you can see in the soybeans here. From a water infiltration standpoint, like in this cornfield, if we can't keep the soil covered, most everything else that we do to try to improve the health of the soil will not be very effective without adequate soil cover. Number two, we want to minimize soil disturbance, and I'm showing that. This is our tractor. We were planting corn this spring. We were rolling down a massive amount of hairy vetch and cereal rye. There's rollers on the front of that planter, so it's rolling it down and then planting. In this instance, we were planting popcorn right into all of that. So we're minimizing the soil disturbance. We don't want to move any more soil than we absolutely have to. Here's another picture from a few years ago of some dryland corn coming up. And like I say, you can't even see that we moved any residue, moved any soil where that corn is. And in fact, that second plant of corn is coming right up through an old radish carcass that we cut right in half, but really never moved it. So this is what we want to see. We want to look at our soil. We want to see residue. We don't want to see soil. Number three, we want to maximize the amount of diversity, both in plants and in insects, and really in biology. And the only way to maximize the diversity of roots in the soil is to have a diversity of plants growing above the ground. And so that's why we are big proponents of diverse cover crops when we can do them. We do try to have a more diverse crop rotation. That's much more difficult to do. So we're just big proponents of having diversity in the system wherever you can get it. Number four, we want to maximize life and growth of plants. So we always want something growing. And I see Dean Kroll is on this call. Dean is a great proponent of doing some interseeding, V4 interseeding into corn. It's very challenging. These pictures, these are not from our farm. These are from customers. These are the good examples. I could show you lots of examples where it doesn't look anywhere near this good, but we're trying. We want to maximize how long plants are growing on every acre if possible, because that's what's building our soil. That's what's sequestering that carbon. That's what's preventing those weeds from growing and supporting the biological life. And then the fifth principle is we want to integrate livestock wherever we can, however we can, whether that be through just the grazing of a rye cover crop like you see in the top left, Maybe it's grazing a summer cover crop like the top right, or it can be, even if we can't get livestock out on the ground, we can bring livestock products out there, like we're composting manure here. This is actually our composting operation. We're composting manure, we're composting seed cleanings, we're composting spoiled corn from the neighboring co-ops, just composting all sorts of things and then putting that out on the fields, bringing some of that biology that livestock would normally bring. And then the sixth principle of soil health is just know the context, know the situation that you're dealing with. And we stress how important this is simply because Nebraska is such a diverse state, and many of the states that you folks hail from are no different. There is wide variation from one part of the state to the next. And I can't make a recommendation to somebody in eastern Nebraska and expect it to work for a farmer in western Nebraska. We need to tailor make the practices that we're going to put into place to get these principles to work. And the principles will work everywhere. We've seen that, we know that to be the case, but it sometimes is wildly different practices that we need to get those principles accomplished. So know the context of what you're working with, your crop rotation, the limitations that you have, and that really helps bring it all together. So we did spend quite a bit of time in the report talking about barriers to soil health adoption, quite a list of them here. None of these are going to surprise anybody on this call. And there's some that we didn't even list here yet, but we don't spend a lot of time on these, but we wanted to acknowledge that there are a lot of barriers to soil health adoption, and that's why adoption rates are relatively low in our opinion, lower than they should be anyway, because there are a lot of barriers to overcome, some of them economic, some of them just dealing with equipment and management and different things like that. So those are things that are going to have to be overcome if we're going to put more soil health practices on the ground. So one of the main directives of LB 243 that we were charged with through the legislature is to develop an initiative and a statewide plan to increase soil health adoption and education within Nebraska. And so as we did this, we entitled this initiative, the Soil Health for Nebraska Wealth. We like that because it not only stresses that soil health can bring more wealth to Nebraska farmers, but really the wealth of Nebraska is in her natural resources, primarily the soil and the water resources that we have. And so when we're protecting them and when we're making them healthier and cleaner and more abundant, then that brings more wealth to our state as a whole. And so through this initiative, we wanted to develop better methods to measure soil health. We wanted to improve the communication that's going on within the state with soil health programs. We wanted to be more tactical in the programs that were being offered. We wanted to increase the awareness and knowledge of soil health, demonstrate best practices on a regional basis, focus on economic benefits, enhance soil health learning, increase research around soil health, and then actively pursue multiple sources of funding. And that's a lot. And there's no doubt that this report is pretty big. It's pretty lofty goals. For all of them to be accomplished is going to take quite some time and a lot of coordination to do it. It's not all going to happen overnight. If it does all happen, it's certainly going to have to come in stages. So within our report, within this initiative, we have 5 goals. The first goal is to establish a Nebraska State Soil Health Hub with regional proving grounds. And basically what we want to do here is we're recommending that some sort of a coordinating body be formed, whether it's a whole new entity or whether it's more of a loose knit association of some of the main key players. We don't exactly know what that will look like. We feel like a new entity is what's needed that's made up of all these key players is going to be the most effective, but there's a lot of work to be done there. But this hub would be responsible for working with and communicating and coordinating the existing work that's being done between the university, between the NRCS, between the natural resource districts and private industry, just to help bring all that together and tie it together and make sure there's no gaps and help promote it and communicate it out across the state, facilitate those things, promote more people to do it, to recruit funding, to recruit participants. We just need somebody that has that dedicated voice to soil health within Nebraska. And we feel like that can be accomplished with this state soil health hub. And then as a part of that, we would want to see regional proving grounds set up, which would be breaking the state into generally these 6 different areas that you can see on the screen there. It's already kind of broken up into that with just kind of the natural ecosystems. University extension outreach is loosely based on these lines, as well as a lot of the NRCS districts and areas as well. And so within each one of these regions, we would have localized efforts, regional efforts to do education, to do demonstration, to bring people together, to show them, to demonstrate what practices are going to be most effective in those areas. Goal number 2 is to form a Nebraska statewide producer learning community. And this would just simply be bringing producers together in some sort of a organized fashion, learning community. A lot of it obviously would be online, but hopefully there'd be some in-person events as well. Like this is from our field day this summer, but you could have things like this all across the state where farmers get together. They look at what other people are doing. They learn from each other. They can share their ideas. They can share what failed for them and just learn from each other. We just feel like there's lots and lots of benefits that can come from this. Some great examples out there already. South Dakota Soil Health Coalition has a great example. I know Minnesota has recently started a good soil health group. So there's some pretty good templates and patterns already out there for forming something like this. So we think something like this can move forward well. The third thing is we want to see an emphasis on developing the next generation of soil health practitioners. When we talk to many of the co-ops, when we talk to NRCS, NRDs, many of them said, hey, we'd like to really hire a soil health specialist, but we really can't find people that have that background, that have that training, that have that expertise. And, you know, for us as a private company, a soil health cover crop seed company, you know, we're trying to hire 5 or 6 people right now. And the same thing, you can't really find those people. We have to find good people and then train them, but it would be great to find people that already have that training. So we're recommending that the university get together with some of the community colleges and coordinate with FFA and 4-H and just have a statewide effort to not only start training the next generation of soil health farmers, the production folks, but also we purposely call this practitioners because we want to see the next generation of extension agents and 4-H workers and NRCS technicians. We want to see all of those people trained and have that background in soil health so that they can step into these positions at a much higher level and really take off much quicker than if they came in with very little soil health background. Goal number 4 was to recruit $50 million in additional soil health funding and incentives over the next 10 years. This is a pretty big, lofty goal, but we think it's very achievable because this is going to happen not through new taxes or anything like that. We're not looking for additional taxation or anything like that. We're looking at this primarily through corporate funding programs like ecosystem or carbon programs. Cargill has a Beef Up Sustainability Initiative that recently launched in Nebraska. And that right there, I think, was a $6 or $8 million initiative over the next few years. And they're working with cattle producers to try to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in beef production systems. So there's a ton of money out there to come into these soil health programs and systems. And we feel like if we can get this hub created, if we can have a fairly tight producer network, well coordinated anyway, that's going to make Nebraska more attractive to bringing in some of these corporate programs and corporate funding than a state that maybe doesn't have some of that organization or some of those resources available to help bring these to the ground. And then number 5 was just to establish some really solid Nebraska soil health measurements and benchmarks. You know, from the very first meeting, we talked about the fact that people just don't understand how to measure soil health. We don't have a kind of a universally accepted soil health measurement or benchmark for Nebraska. And so there's been some good work done in this area already through university folks, NRCS folks. We just want to encourage this work to continue, encourage maybe a few other people to jump in there and get some measurements and standards so that people know, hey, if I start planting cover crops or if I start a no-till system or I diversify my crop rotation, here's how I can measure if my soil health has increased because of these management changes that I've made. And so again, a lot of good work being done out there. So we just want this one to continue and really get some good standards so that farmers have confidence in being able to measure and see changes. And that's going to be really important too if they want to be part of a carbon program, a carbon sequestration program, and try to get some of that additional incentive money. we're going to have the ability to measure those changes somehow. So this is just a little graphic that we came up with. It kind of summarizes the whole thing with that soil health hub right in the middle, because that's the core of everything. And then it all radiates out from that. They're going to help collaborate and communicate and coordinate the different programs within the state. The regional proving grounds will demonstrate and educate and reach out to people on those regional locations. And then developing that next generation of practitioners, as well as that producer learning community, addressing both the existing farmers and the next generation of soil health workers, is going to kind of be that next ring of outgrowth. And then that outside ring, of course, is all the societal benefits that comes from having a healthy soil system within your state. Everything from healthy food to cleaner water to, you know, less carbon in the atmosphere, but putting it back where it belongs, into the soil. So just a little graphic that kind of summarizes where we see the benefits and how we see all that working. So we wanted to really stress to the governor and to the legislature that, you know, this whole initiative, it's 100% voluntary. We are not advocating any mandates, any regulations. You know, there's enough benefits that if we're doing a good job of teaching and educating and demonstrating and showing, that people will jump on board. Not everybody, of course, but there will be a lot of people will jump on board out of the voluntary, looking at the economics, looking at the long-term benefits. We don't want this hub just to be another level of red tape or bureaucracy. We don't want it to be a government program, but it needs to be a cooperative effort between these different stakeholder groups, particularly UNL and the natural resource districts and the NRCS. And those groups, along with commodity groups and all the others, everybody needs to kind of be involved in this, because we met with 31 different groups. You can see them here on this screen. We met with 31 different groups in the creation of this report, and they all expressed pretty good support for soil health across Nebraska. Now, there were obviously varying degrees of ideas of how to bring that soil health work to Nebraska, varying degrees of support for the whole initiative, but everybody supported it in general and in principle. And so we got a lot of good feedback. There's a lot of energy out there from these different groups that we think that with the next steps, we can move forward in utilizing some of that. So those next steps are going to be, and just kind of in summarizing here, we need to have a meeting to try to start forming this soil health hub in Nebraska. The legislature right now is considering a legislative resolution that basically accepts the findings of this report and then encourages a grassroots effort to carry it forward. We purposely are not asking the government to go forth and create a new department to do this, because we just don't think that's realistic. Number one, they don't have the money. Number two, we just don't think that there's the political will to probably do that. So basically, we're just asking them to accept the report, say, yes, this is all a good idea. And then we will go out to all these different partners that expressed interest, and we will take the next steps. Kind of the same way, we think that there can be a group put together to work on both a producer learning community as well as the next generation of soil health practitioners. Again, UNL is going to have heavy involvement in this, as well as the natural resource districts and the NRCS, as well as individuals who just have passion for these different areas. Goal 4 with the soil health funding, it probably is not going to be really driven forward hard until a soil health hub of some sort is formed, simply because there is just a lot of work that takes to get that going. So we need some full-time staff in order to do that. And then, of course, the benchmarks and measurements is already kind of an ongoing thing. So we're just encouraging a really strong technical committee to be formed to continue that process and bring some really strong measurements and benchmarks to the table. So another little infographic here, just kind of sharing and looking at the different pieces of the initiative, how they work together. If you have any questions about this, please just shoot me an email, keith@greencoverseed.com. I would be happy to address any questions and stuff that you have there that we were not able to cover.